So we've been talking about the water molecule, and now we're going to talk about the most important video of this lecture series, which is the properties of water, which are the amazing properties that support life. Now, because water is polar, because there's a difference in the amount of time that the electrons spend around the oxygen and spend around the hydrogen, remember oxygen is more electronegative. This means it's going to suck up the electrons more, meaning the oxygen side is going to have a partial negative charge and the hydrogen side is going to have a positive charge. This will make water a little mini magnet. Now on top of that, water has hydrogen and oxygen, which is a very highly electronegative atom, so it makes what we call hydrogen bonds, meaning there's a strong connection between water molecules. Together, the high polarity of the water molecule, which makes it act like a magnet, and the strong connection between water molecules because it makes hydrogen bonds, will give water the following amazing properties which will help it support life. The first amazing property we already talked about is the idea that water is less dense as a solid. Because of the hydrogen bonds between the water molecules, as water reaches 4 degrees Celsius, it starts to lock into a crystal. The hydrogen bonds lock into place, which separate the water molecules more than they are as a liquid when they're allowed to be broken and formed, allowing the molecules to be closer than they are as a solid. Now, this will start around 4 degrees Celsius and be at its greatest around 0 degrees when the water actually freezes. And that means water expands as it freezes. This is very important for life because you see what happens is that instead of sinking, ice floats on water. And that's so important because literally, because the ice floats on water, it doesn't crush the life forms which are below it as it forms. If ice sunk, when it forms, it would crush everything that's beneath it. And not only that, but then the entire lake would freeze during the winter because it would freeze and sink and then freeze and sink, and little by little, layers and layers of frozen ice would form on the lake and then the ocean, and the entire ocean or lake would freeze during the winter. That would be devastating for life on Earth. When you consider that life started on the water, it's impossible for life to even exist. Now, on the contrary, because ice floats on water, it actually insulates the lake. Because if outside on the atmosphere, say it's negative 30 degrees, that layer of ice will form a block that's going to separate the atmosphere from the water that's below the ice. That means while outside it might be negative 30, below the ice is never ever going to be too cold. Never less than, say, negative 2 or negative 3 degrees at the most. This means that the water is always going to be tolerable underneath the ice. This supports all the marine life forms that live in those cold places of the earth, and which is why in polar regions and during the winter, lakes and oceans support the ecosystem of these places because life forms can, like to see the penguins going there below the ice to hunt. They can actually live under the ice and hunt under the ice, and doesn't kill the food chains, survive the winter because of this. Another one of the amazing properties of water is the fact that it takes a lot of energy for water to heat up. And then again, it has to do with the hydrogen bonds. Because in order to make water heat up, because water is a little magnet, and because it has those strong hydrogen bonds connecting the water molecules, it will take a lot of energy to break those bonds before water actually starts to heat up, or the molecules start moving faster. This means that water will absorb a lot of energy before it heats up. This is called high specific heat. Specific heat basically means the amount of energy necessary to heat up a substance. And in the case of water, it takes a lot of energy. And that's actually how we define a calorie. A calorie is the amount of energy necessary to raise 1 gram of water by 1 degree. Now, that is actually a lot of energy that is what it takes to do that. And so water will resist temperature change. Now that's actually very important for life because water resists temperature change, and the fact that most life forms are mostly made up of water, that means that it will help life forms maintain their temperature. If you are 70% water, 70% of you is already trying to maintain its temperature. It doesn't like to change temperature. That means it helps you maintain homeostasis. Likewise, ecosystems, which have a lot of water in them, like lakes and oceans, and even forests, which have a lot of water in the air, that will help maintain the temperature of the ecosystem because water does not like to change its temperature. The Gulf Stream takes hot water from the poles all the way to New York and Europe because water doesn't like to change its temperature. So all of these things are only possible because water resists temperature change. And in class, I'm going to actually set my hand on fire, and I'm not going to catch on fire because I'm going to have a layer of water protecting my hand. It's a little more complicated than that. Do not try it at home. It's a special substance, but this can happen because of the amazing property of water of resisting temperature change, and it supports life. Another thing that supports life is water's high heat of vaporization. It has something to do with the high specific heat too, but it's the idea that it takes a lot of energy to make water actually evaporate. Before water evaporates, because it's a strong magnet and because it has the hydrogen bonds, you have to first break the hydrogen bonds before the water becomes gas. This means that it takes a lot of energy to make water become a gas. This is very important for life. And that's actually the principle that makes air conditioning systems work. You put some warm air on some humid surface, and that warm air is going to heat up the water that's on the humid surface, but it's going to take a lot of warm air to make that heat surface warm up. And that's going to cool the air in the process. That's when in the summer, when you spray your body with water and you put some wind on it, it cools you down because the heat of your body warms up that water, and then when the water evaporates, the hottest molecules will go, taking the heat with them. That is also why you sweat and why plants put water over the leaves, why evapotranspiration is a thing. Transpiration, which plants and a lot of other organisms will do, putting sweat and putting water over your surface, will allow water to absorb the heat that's in the surface and take the heat with it when it evaporates, which will cool down the surface. It's just called evaporative cooling. Likewise, once the heat goes, it stays in the molecules that are going towards the atmosphere. That means that during the night, when it would be cold because you don't have the sunlight warming up the surface, it is not as cold as it would have been without the water in the air. Mercury has no atmosphere to protect itself from loss of energy during the night, so it's incredibly cold. But on the Earth, where there's a lot of water in the air, the water will act like a blanket, like a greenhouse gas that actually traps the heat that blasted during the day and protects us from actually freezing to death during the night. That's why in deserts, when there's very little water, it gets really cold during the night because there's no water to do that. And why Florida, that has an incredible amount of water in the air, barely changes temperature during the night because all of the humidity traps the heat. And then when the water actually condensates and forms rain, that actually releases heat, which warms up the atmosphere and actually prevents the atmosphere from being too cold during the night. So that again supports life and helps life. So all of these things are examples of how water supports life. Another one is cohesion. Now, because water is a magnet and because of the strong hydrogen bonds that exist in the water molecule, it's incredibly attracted to itself. That's what cohesion is. Cohesion, cooperation, water molecules to themselves. This means water will stick to itself a lot. And that's why droplets of water fall all the way from the sky and stick together in the droplets of rain. That's why droplets of water can stick together at the tip of leaves. That's why in outer space, when the astronauts let water go, it doesn't split up, but stays as one big bubble. Since gravity doesn't pull it towards the floor, it stays as one big bubble. And that's why surface tension is a thing. Now, surface tension is the attraction that occurs at the surface of the water because the attraction that exists between the water molecules. So that means the top of the water will form this little skin-looking thing, and that's actually very important for life because some organisms actually rely on that surface tension to lay their eggs right at the surface of the water, like the mosquito that you see over there in the top right. Surface tension is also what holds together the molecular structure of the cell membrane, because from both sides of the cell membrane, there's water outside the cells and water inside the cells. That's going to help prevent the water from the cell from popping, because pressure, surface tension on the outside and on the inside will squeeze the cell membrane in place and keep it in place. It is also surface tension that holds together organisms that don't have skeletons. We call them hydrostatic skeletons. And the attraction between the water molecules is what's going to hold together the shape of things that don't have skeletons. And that's what holds the skin of organisms like that. It is also that which explains the meniscus, which forms when you drop something inside of a glass container and you're trying to measure the volume of that. You're going to see that this pattern will form inside the glass container. You have the glass container, and then you have the water molecule, the water in there, and it kind of curves, it bends like you see happening over here. And the reason why it's bending like that is because of the surface tension. So inside the glass container, you're going to have that bending thing, or that meniscus, because water is attracted to itself, forming that surface tension. And that's why you have to use the bottom of the little hill to measure the volume, not the top of the water. Next time you do a lab in class, watch out for that. And we're going to see what we're talking about here. And another one of these things actually is going to be capillary action. And we'll talk more about that in the next video. But capillary action, which is water going up the roots all the way to the leaves of the plants, can only be possible because water sticks to itself. Another one of the amazing properties of water is going to be adhesion. Now, unlike cohesion, which is water attaching to itself, adhesion is water attaching to other things. It adds itself to other things. It sticks itself to other things. So you see the little drawing over there in the corner is water and other things. And that's why water droplets will stay in the leaves, why water droplets will stay in spider webs, and why water has the ability to crawl up the tubes or all up the stems of plants all the way up to the leaves, because they're attaching themselves to the sides of the stems of the leaves. And the way this happens, remember, is because water is like a little magnet. And so because water is kind of magnetic, if there's anything on the surface that's polar, and you see that on the top side of it there, or charged, water will be attracted to that. So the positive end of the water molecule, which is the hydrogen end, will be attracted to the negative parts of the surface. And the negative end of the water molecule, which is the oxygen end, will be attracted to the positive parts of the surface. And that's what is going to allow water to stick to things. And that's why when water condensates in the morning, it will stick to the sides of the window, because it adheres to things. And that's also what's going to allow capillary action to occur and allow water to go all the way up to the plants, to the top of the plants. It also will help lives because it will help water be conserved at the leaves. Because instead of evaporating as quickly as it would, water stays in the surface of the leaf, and it helps preserve water loss from the plant because of it sticking to the plant. And another way it helps too, because water is so adhesive, it will dissolve things very well. And we'll talk more about that in the next video. But the fact that water is incredibly adhesive will give water its universal solvent properties, where it will tend to actually stick to things and dissolve them when you put them inside water. We'll talk about that in the next video. And these are the amazing properties of water which facilitate life. Water is less dense as a solid. Water has a high specific heat. Water has a high heat of vaporization. Water has high cohesion and high adhesion. It means it floats as a liquid. It means it takes a lot of energy to make water heat up. It means that it takes a lot of energy to make water evaporate. Water sticks to itself, and it sticks to other things. And this helps life in a variety of ways. So the most important thing to know is that this is caused by water's high polarity, which gives it magnetic properties, and the fact that water attaches to itself with those hydrogen bonds, which are weak, but thousands of them make water stick to itself more than other substances stick. And that gives water these amazing properties which facilitate life in all the ways we talked about in this video.